So this is going to be probably the most listy video I ever make. It is December 30th, 2024 at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to rank each episode by season and see which ones are the most popular. I will be ranking each episode season by season because I just think it's more fair for the episodes that way when you at least compare them in a sense like this. And at the end of 2025, I will do the same thing to see if any episodes gain a large amount of traction or if these rankings change. At the end of this video, I will list the top 10 most viewed death battles of all time. I made a community post a while ago asking what video ideas sound the most interesting, and this video right here had the most votes. I think some people misunderstood my idea and thought I'd be ranking the most popular episodes of each season against each other, so because of this, I'm actually going to do this at the end of my video. I won't go too much into details since I'll most likely review these episodes in the future anyways, but for those people who may have misunderstood, I want to make sure I give them exactly what they wanted. Without further ado though, let's start with Season 1. The least popular episode is the TMNT Battle Royale with 1,065,948 views. Now, this episode isn't on YouTube anymore, but there is 2 re-uploads, so I just added the view count of both of those videos together to get this number. I don't think this is the right number at all, but it's the best I can come up with on YouTube since they don't have the episode up anymore. Even if this number is wrong, it's probably the case that this is the least popular since you can't find this on YouTube normally anymore. Number 24, Bomberman vs. Dig Dug at 4,648,549 views. Makes sense? No one really talks about this. Number 23 is Hagar vs. Zangief with 5,308,812 views. God, they need to give Final Fight more love. Number 22, we have Felicia vs. Tao Kaka with 6,422,771 views. I'm surprised with all the people with a cat girl fetish that this didn't get higher. Number 21 is Boba Fett vs. Samus with 6,983,891 views. Honestly, I'm shocked since this is the first episode of the entire Death Battle series, but just looking at the episode, then yeah, you can tell it's the first episode. Number 20, Rogue vs. Wonder Woman with 7,383,403 views. This doesn't deserve to be this high, but titties, I guess. Number 19 is Chun-Li vs. Mai Shiranui with 7,760,281 views. I feel pretty much the same about both these last 2 episodes, but this one I guess just had better boobies, I guess. Number 18 is Zitz vs. Leonardo with 7,892,850 views. This makes me curious where the TMNT Battle Royale would be placed since you had to vote for this episode after the TMNT Battle Royale. Essentially, Leonardo would have either fought Zitz or the White Ranger. So everyone that watched that episode voted to get this episode. So I'm just curious how much the TMNT Battle Royale would have now if it stayed up. Number 17 is Yoshi vs. Riptor with 8,041,701 views. Who asked for this? Number 16 is Akuma vs. Shang Tsung with 8,282,031 views. Mortal Kombat vs. Street Fighter is not a good pairing, please stop doing it. Number 15 is Zelda vs. Peach with 8,285,826 views, and now this one shocks me. Back in the day, this was one of the ones that always popped into my head. I assumed that this would at least make the top 10, but I guess not. Number 14, Eggman vs. Wily with 8,556,175 views, and this is slander. This episode is the best in Season 1, better than Goku vs. Superman, fuck you, fight me. Number 13 is Pikachu vs. Blanca with 9,015,392 views. Come on, guys, we're better than this. Can we bump this down a little bit? Number 12 is Thor vs. Raiden with 9,776,287 views. Back in the day, makes sense, the 2 Thunder Gods fight each other. Now with Versus Brain, doesn't make sense. Raiden gets stomped even back then. 11, Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash with 10,124,293 views. I honestly have nothing to say about this. I'm pretty sure it just had My Little Pony and people clicked it. Number 10 is Luke Skywalker vs. Harry Potter with 11,357,322 views. These 2 characters lived a pretty similar story, so it makes sense why people paired these 2 together. Number 9 is Justin Bieber vs. Rebecca Black with 11,549,310 views. And look, if you didn't watch it because of the infamy of this being a big cyberbully episode, then you watched it because you really hate these 2 and wanted to see them get cyberbullied. Number 8, Link vs. Cloud with 12,038,539 views. The man on the N64 versus the man on the PlayStation. I don't understand this matchup very much. Number 7, Goomba vs. Koopa at 12,751,198 views. This is peak, I don't know what else to tell you, this should be number 1. Number 6, Master Chief vs. Doomguy with 15,081,682 views. Shooty shooty blam blam makes sense, man. Number 5, Vegeta vs. Shadow with 16,288,239 views. This one may be one of my most favorite in Season 1, so I'm glad to see it this high, but honestly I'm shocked it got higher than some of these other episodes. Number 4 is Kratos vs. Spawn with 17,552,080 views. I don't disagree with this being popular, it's a really fun idea. It doesn't work so much now, but back then, I really dug it. Number 3 is Mario vs. Sonic with 24,711,640 views. Fantastic. There's nothing else to say about this. I'm surprised it's only number 3, but then I'm not surprised when you realize number 2 is Batman vs. Spider-Man with 26,735,409 views. Another classic matchup. And finally, number 1, by a large margin, Goku vs. Superman, 47,762,914 views. This is what started Versus debating right here. It makes so much sense, connections-wise, fight-wise, everyone being mad about the results-wise, it just makes a lot of sense. If you can't tell already, it's the popularity of the matchup that makes it the most viewed and not the content of the episode. You'll see later on that some episodes that are just not as good as other episodes get higher up on the ranking for some reason. Overall, Season 1 of Death Battle has 305,376,543 views. That is an insane number, and I'm so curious to see how that changes next year. Moving on to Season 2. Number 32 is Ragna vs. Soul Bad Guy with 4,417,852 views. This is by far one of the worst episodes in Season 2. I wouldn't say it's the worst, but I'm honestly surprised it's in last place after seeing some of the other matchups here. Number 31 is Fox vs. Bucky O'Hare with 5,241,297 views. Nobody knows who Bucky O'Hare is. This is what I thought would be in last place. Number 30 is Boba Fett vs. Samus Aran with 5,493,709 views. This one is really surprising because it was also ranked lowly in the Season 1 list. So I'm wondering if people just don't like this idea as much as I do, because I think this is really fun. Although I still want to see Samus fight Master Chief. Number 29 is Beast vs. Goliath with 5,573,364 views. This is the worst episode of the season by far. It should be in last place. Number 28 is Mega Man vs. Astro Boy with 6,080,835 views. One of my favorite episodes this season. It should be a lot higher. Number 27, Ivy vs. Orchid with 6,171,574 views. With how popular Soul Calibur is, I'm surprised this didn't get as many views as some of the other episodes. But maybe people saw this and just didn't care about her fighting Orchid. Number 26 is Strider vs. Ryu Hayabusa with 6,557,271 views. It was a really strong start to Season 2, and I think it's a really fun matchup. I wish it got more, man. Number 25 is Tiger Zord vs. Gundam Epion with 7,019,728 views. Interesting idea, but I don't think people were asking for this, so that makes sense that it's all the way down here. Number 24, Hercule vs. Dan with 7,491,981 views. And listen, if you didn't think of this before when you were a kid, you're crazy. This is the matchup I always thought of. It was like, who's more pathetic? There's a couple other characters I would add to this list, but you know, these two specifically, I've thought about them fighting before this episode came out. Number 23, Chuck Norris vs. Sagata Senshiro with 7,776,431 views. People really like Chuck Norris, but people don't know Sagata Senshiro. I was a really big Sega fan back in the day, and even I didn't know who he was until later in my life, so don't blame this one for being all the way down here. Number 22, He-Man vs. Lion-O with 7,802,857 views. Classic cartoons, gotta love the matchup. Number 21, Green Arrow vs. Hawkeye with 8,690,598 views. Really fun matchup, but I can see why people don't think it would be an entertaining fight. Number 20, Yang vs. Tifa with 8,847,870 views. Even though people really liked Ruby, people didn't like Rooster Teeth, and that's something they can never shake for their entire career. So I think a lot of people probably didn't watch this episode because of that. I like Ruby though. Begrudgingly. Number 19 is Donkey Kong vs. Knuckles with 8,957,325 views. I guess it makes sense, but who the fuck asked for this? Number 18, Fulgore vs. Sector with 9,161,646 views. Damn, I just noticed how much love Killer Instinct gets in early Death Battle. Number 17, Shao Kahn vs. M. Bison with 10,528,883 views. Bullshit bosses, makes a fun fight, please stop doing Mortal Kombat vs. Street Fighter. Number 16, Darth Vader vs. Dr. Doom with 10,879,283 views. I don't know anyone who really talked about this matchup beforehand, even if the connections kinda make sense. Number 15 is Guts vs. Nightmare with 10,961,485 views. It makes sense that people would want this matchup because this is what Guts does every day and they just want to see him do it more. Number 14, Luigi vs. Tails with 11,781,065 views. Calm down, people. Calm it down. Mario vs. Sonic is not that interesting. And this is the third third one on the list so far. Number 13, Solid Snake vs. Sam Fisher with 12,304,326 views. This is such a fun episode in the peak of Season 2. Number 12, Gaara vs. Toph with 12,730,380 views. People probably hate watch the fuck out of this because the verdict is crazy. Number 11 is Pokemon vs. Digimon with 14,166,112 views. Now this one is crazy to me because this is something I thought about all the time, Pokemon or Digimon. Everyone thought of this. The fact that it's titled this and it didn't even break the top 10 is crazy to me. Maybe people just started falling off of video games in Death Battle, I don't know, but it's just nuts that it's not even in the top 10. Number 10 is Wolverine vs. Raiden with 14,421,520 views. I think Wolverine and Raiden carried this episode separately. I don't think people were asking for this matchup, but I love this episode. Number 9, Ryu vs. Scorpion with 15,638,643 views. The main faces of both franchises. Makes sense. Please stop doing Mortal Kombat vs. Street Fighter matchups. Number 8 is Kirby vs. Majin Buu with 16,223,555 views. Just looking at a picture of these guys next to each other, you get it. You don't even need to know anything about these characters. You get why this matchup exists. And if you do know these characters, you're thinking, damn, Kirby's gonna die. And if you really know these characters, you're like, damn, Majin Buu is gonna fucking die. Number 7, Pokemon Battle Royale with 18,153,592. Maybe people didn't fall off video games like I said before, but this episode just caters to Pokemon fans who really want to see these three characters fight each other. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying the concept is very generally appealing. Number 6 is Terminator vs. RoboCop with 19,156,610 views. Again, surprised this didn't get more because it's such a beloved matchup. It's so beloved that it's happened already, but I guess there's just 5 matchups that beat it out. Number 5 is Iron Man vs. Lex Luthor with 19,245,767 views. I am shocked that this got above the last one, but Marvel vs. DC got a lot of views back in the day, and I mean a lot, so it makes sense. Number 4 is Batman vs. Captain America with 19,857,602 views. Remember what I just said? Same thing applies here, but it makes more sense since Batman and Captain America are a better matchup than Batman and Spider-Man. Number 3 is Goku vs. Superman 2 with 22,128,242 views. I'm sorry, Ben Singer, I'm so sorry. I know you don't want this matchup to be this popular, but it just is. Number 2 is Godzilla vs. Gamera with 23,867,794 views. Kaiju monsters fighting each other, the views make themselves. And number 1 is Deadpool vs. Deathstroke with 42,313,946 views. 4 out of 5 of the top 5 episodes this season are Marvel and DC characters, so you really started to see why they started to shift towards those characters in the future. Season 2 overall has 399,643,143 views. But moving on to Season 3, number 14 is Ken vs. Terry with 2,410,586 views. Number 13 is Amy Rose vs. Ramona Flowers with 3,881,062 views. This matchup is stupid. It should be in last place. The episode is fine enough, I guess, but like, why? Number 12 is Cammy vs. Sonya with 4,002,978 views. Like I said before, people were probably moving more away from video game matchups, and they probably started moving away from fighting game matchups specifically at this time. Number 11 is Meta vs. Carolina with 4,723,527 views. I think Red vs. Blue has a better shot of getting views than Ruby, just because it's a legacy series that started before all the controversy with the company started happening. So I think over time we'll probably see this episode get more popular than the other ones. Number 10 is Ratchet & Clank vs. Jak and Daxter with 6,040,262 views. This is the one I wanted since episode 1 of Death Battle. This and one other you'll see on the list later. Number 9 is Bowser vs. Ganondorf with 6,242,734 views. The big Nintendo baddies? Makes sense. Number 8 is Zoro vs. Erza with 8,158,775 views. I guess people compared One Piece and Fairy Tail a lot back in the day. I think they still do, actually. Number 7 is Mewtwo vs. Shadow with 8,734,002 views. It's fine being smack dab in the middle. I don't know if it being a better episode would have added to the view count, because oh my god, that episode is controversial. Number 6 is Tracer vs. Scout with 9,282,686 views. I don't really play either of these games. I just know they're similar games, so it makes sense. Number 5 is Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie with 9,483,335 views. This was a joke. Marvel fans would click on it. My Little Pony fans would also click on it. This was kind of fun. It makes sense it hits the top 5. Number 4 is Flash vs. Quicksilver with 13,515,521 views. With such an obvious stomp, that everyone agrees on. I'm surprised it hit the top 5, but it's Marvel and DC, so it makes sense. Number 3 is Hulk vs. Doomsday with 13,734,468 views. Big strong men that punch each other, what else do you want to see? Come on. Number 2, Joker vs. Sweet Tooth with 13,847,776 views. This one makes me so happy. It's definitely carried by Joker, but this is such an interesting matchup and I love seeing it because I love Sweet Tooth. And number 1 is Dante vs. Bayonetta with 14,414,784 views. Classic hack and slash series made by the same guy. That guy would also later go on to shit talk Death Battle after the fact because he's just a salty motherfucker, so fuck him. Overall, Season 3 got 118,472,496 views. Not bad, Season 3. Not bad at all. Starting with Season 4, we have number 16, Smokey Bear vs. McGruff the Crime Dog with 2,725,066 views. Nobody talks about these guys anymore. Makes sense it's in last place. Number 15 is Lucario vs. Renamon with 3,975,769 views. Again, shocked Pokemon vs. Digimon didn't make it that high, but this matchup isn't very appealing to me, so I guess it wasn't appealing to others either. Number 14 is Metal Sonic vs. Zero. Didn't they already do a matchup like this? Oh wait, they did. This just takes the coolest parts of both series and puts them against each other. Got it. Number 13 is Scrooge McDuck vs. Shovel Knight with 4,273,182 views. Shovel Knight was really popping off back in the day. I think he carried the view count. Number 12 is Power Rangers vs. Voltron with 4,391,539 views. Come on, guys, this is so cool. Let's get this higher, man. Let's get this higher. Number 11 is Lara Croft vs. Nathan Drake with 4,638,104 views. Seeing as this was the pop-off of the season, I'm surprised it's this low on the list. But again, in my theory, I think that video game matchups started to fall off, and that's why we saw less of them. Number 10 is Shredder vs. Silver Samurai with 5,057,949 views. I don't think Silver Samurai carried the views here. I think it was all Shredder, baby. TMNT for the win! Number 9 is Android 18 vs. Captain Marvel with 5,846,747 views. Captain Marvel, really popular at the time. Android 18, probably less popular, but it makes sense, and people really wanted to see a Dragon Ball character beat the ass of a Marvel character at this point. Number 8 is Balrog vs. TJ Combo with 5,904,976 views. People just really want to see a nice old boxing match. Number 7 is Natsu vs. Ace with 6,110,325 views. Again, One Piece and Fairy Tail, match made in heaven. People really like it, I guess. Number 6, Sub-Zero vs. Glacius with 6,204,444 views. It's funny that we go from a fire matchup to an ice matchup. This just tells me ice is better than fire. That means winter is better than summer, and I'm okay with that. Number 5 is Thor vs. Wonder Woman with 6,374,276 views. This one, it fucking writes itself, man. Marvel DC just gets those views. Number 4 is Virgil vs. Sephiroth with 7,264,862 views. FF7 is very loved, so that's why I think it's up here. Number 3 is Batman Beyond vs. Spider-Man 2099 with 8,003,186 views. Number 2, Venom vs. Bane with 10,180,984 views. Surprised this got above the last one, but maybe people just really wanted to see these two characters fight. And number 1 is Naruto vs. Ichigo with 12,633,631 views. It's such a shame this episode came out the way it did, but that doesn't change the fact that Bleach fans really wanted a win here. Overall, Season 4 got 97,802,397 views. Season 5, starting with Sora vs. Pit with 3,468,227 views. I don't get this matchup. It seems like if everyone that watched Season 5, they didn't get as much as I did. This is not it for Sora. Number 15 is Raven vs. Twilight Sparkle with 3,774,466 views. My Little Pony couldn't carry you to the halfway point this time, motherfucker. Number 14 is Crash vs. Spyro with 3,803,509 views. Why are you so low? This is my childhood we're talking about here. Number 13 is Leon vs. Frank West with 4,377,613 views. I think this is a fun enough matchup. I just think this isn't it for either of the characters. But I wonder if this would get more views if Torian animated it like he wanted to. Number 12 is Ultron vs. Sigma with 5,290,131 views. This literally only exists because of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and that game's bad, so I can't like this. Number 11 is Jotaro Kujo vs. Kenshiro with 5,592,771 views. I always thought they put Kenshiro versus Jonathan Joestar, but thinking about it back then, Jonathan would just get fucking slaughtered. This was a way better matchup for him. Number 10 is Ryu vs. Jin with 5,959,932 views. This is a way better matchup than Ryu vs. Scorpion. This is a way better episode than Ryu vs. Scorpion. I want it to have more views than Ryu vs. Scorpion. Number 9 is Nightwing vs. Daredevil with 6,017,372 views. This was the first live action death battle. I really thought it was going to get more than this because Ismahawk probably would have brought his fan base over, but I guess it just didn't end up like that. Number 8 is Optimus Prime vs. Gundam with 6,155,631 views. I don't think people compared these characters a lot, but I think people really like these characters a lot, so I think that's what got them just past the halfway point. Number 7 is Carnage vs. Lucy with 6,670,008 views. I so wish this did better than it did. Carnage is a big character, so he'll obviously get views. Elfen Lied is a pretty niche series, so I think that audience would automatically come over as soon as they saw Lucy was part of something bigger. Number 6 is Mario vs. Sonic 2 with 6,834,419 views. The fact that Mario vs. Sonic in Season 1 was at number 3, and this matchup didn't even cross the top 5 for its season, really tells you the shift in people's mindset when thinking about matchups. Number 5 is Samurai Jack vs. Afro Samurai with 6,870,933 views. I don't know if people like these characters as much as I do, so I don't think this would have gotten views with its namesake alone. But the episode came out ridiculously good, there was a pretty good word of mouth, I can see it getting big. Number 4 is Roshi vs. Jiraiya with 7,133,662 views. People wanted to see old pervy men fight, I guess. Number 3 is Doctor Strange vs. Dr. Fate with 7,490,421 views. Marvel vs. DC. It's always going to get views, I'm telling you. Number 2 is Batman vs. Black Panther with 8,311,028 views. Pretty much what I said before. And number 1 is Thanos vs. Darkseid with 16,566,108 views. Pretty much what I said before, but at the time, these characters were more popular than the other ones listed. Overall, Season 5 has 104,253,231 views. This had more views than Season 4, and you can tell that the matchup started to shift at this point. Next, we have Season 6, with the least popular matchup being Weiss vs. Mitsuru with 2,596,499 views. Like I said before, people are kind of iffy about Rooster Teeth and their properties, even more so since RWBY at that point kind of was going through a downward spiral in quality, so it makes sense that people wouldn't care too much for this matchup. Number 15 is Wario vs. King DDD with 3,671,669 views. This is kind of a sin, but I get it. King DDD and Wario aren't the most popular character in their franchises, so it makes sense that people don't really search this up that much. Number 14 is Black Widow vs. Widowmaker with 3,872,729 views. Black Widow was really popping off at the time, but Widowmaker, Overwatch wasn't really doing well when this released. Number 13, Dragon Sword vs. Mechagodzilla with 4,342,530 views. I personally really like this episode. I wish it got more views, but franchises like Godzilla and Power Rangers weren't really popping off at this time, at least not to a casual audience. Number 12 is Aquaman vs. Namor with 4,396,640 views. A Marvel vs. DC matchup being this far down on the list is kinda strange. It might signify that these kind of matchups are getting less popular on the Death Battle channel, huh? Either way, it's a matchup that makes sense, but people pretty much knew Aquaman was gonna stomp anyway. Number 11 is Johnny Cage vs. Captain Falcon with 4,791,205 views. Honestly surprised this episode got this high on the list, seeing as I've never heard this matchup exist before this, and who really looks at Mortal Kombat vs. F-Zero of all things. But I'm glad because I like this episode. Number 10 is Mob vs. Tatsumaki with 5,235,633 views. One Punch Man and Mob Psycho are both great shows made by the same guy. The matchup makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad it got pretty popular. Number 9 is the Mega Man Battle Royale with 5,283,203 views. Again, really good episode. I think it should be higher on this list. I think it's a really interesting idea to have every version of Mega Man, even though this isn't every version of Mega Man, fight each other. And apart from Volnut kind of getting shafted in the episode, I think the episode was really good. It deserves to be higher than this. Finally, hitting the halfway point with number 8, Sasuke vs. Hiei, with 5,604,423 views. Really good matchup, I agree with the outcome, most people don't. Sorry guys. Number 7, Ganondorf vs. Dracula with 6,008,170 views. Devil Artemis cooks so hard even when he just joined the show. This episode is so good, probably one of the best ones in that season. It deserves to be at least in the top 3. Number 6, Aang vs. Edward Elric with 6,027,820 views. I'm not really sure why people wanted this. Aang kinda just stomps him into the ground, but hey, Fullmetal Alchemist is good and I'm glad I got on the show. Number 5 is Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern with 7,189,296 views. This episode is very controversial, and controversy gets views. What else can I say? Number 4 is Captain Marvel vs. Shazam with 7,492,506 views. Remember what I said before? Turns out Marvel vs. DC still gets a shit ton of views. I'm just stupid. Number 3, Deadpool vs. The Mask with 8,754,419 views. Deadpool is just such a hot character. You put him in any matchup and you'll get views. Number 2, All Might vs. Might Guy with 8,984,298 views. My Hero was really popular at the time, and Naruto will never not be popular, so this makes a lot of sense. And number 1, Ghost Rider vs. Lobo with 9,991,859 views. The only reason I keep bringing up Marvel and DC getting the most views is because it was a big criticism of Death Battle back in the day, that they were using so much Marvel and DC matchups that it kind of ruined it a little bit. People were getting burnt out, and I think rightfully so. But if you look at the numbers, they're still most likely making the most money on these matchups. But overall, Season 6 got 94,242,899 views. But let's move on to Season 7, starting with number 21, Beerus vs. Galaxia with 1,010,870 views. This is a little bit of an exception because this video got copyrighted the shit off of YouTube. So the only real way we have to actually watch this episode is just the fight that's posted online, or you can go to the Internet Archive and watch the full thing. But as for YouTube, I can picture this being the least popular because it's the least accessible to a casual audience. Number 20, Red vs. Blue with 2,122,183 views. This would have been last place if Beerus vs. Galaxia didn't get fucked off of this list. Like I said before, Rooster Teeth is kinda in a weird position. People really didn't want to see them on Death Battle that much, so it makes sense that this episode didn't get that many views. Number 19, Saberwolf vs. John Talbane with 2,522,516 views. I fucking wish fighting games got more love on Death Battle. This is a sin. Number 18 is Black Canary vs. Sindel with 2,556,011 views. It has a DC character, and that's really good, but it also has a fighting game character, and that's really bad, so they got moderate views. Number 17, She-Ra vs. Wonder Woman with 2,702,344 views. I guess people are just sexist and they don't want to see two women with power fight each other. That's a joke. I just don't think He-Man's that popular, even though I think at the point the She-Ra show was already ongoing. I could easily look that up, but I won't. Number 16, Grey vs. Esdeath with 2,726,758 views. How the fuck did this get this high? Oh yeah, Fairy Tail. Nobody talks about a Kamega kill. Number 15 is Danny Phantom vs. Jake Long with 3,207,582 views. This probably would have gotten more views if Butch Hartman wasn't such a slimy fuck. Number 14 is Leonardo vs. Red Ranger Jason with 3,233,137 views. Pretty decent spot for TMNT versus Power Rangers. The matchup makes a lot of sense. I just don't think either were popping off that much when this episode released. Number 13 is Cable vs. Booster Gold with 3,385,800 views. Cable was just in a big budget movie, so it makes a lot of sense to use him here. Booster Gold people don't really know about that much, except Comic Drake, obviously, but I think people were willing to learn about him after seeing Cable was going to be in a death battle. Number 12 is Zuko vs. Todoroki with 3,701,674 views. They both have scars on their eyes because of their daddy's actions. It makes sense. Number 11 is Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen with 2,713,753 views. This is the episode that proves to everyone that quality doesn't mean it'll get you good views. This episode blows so hard, yet it somehow made it to the halfway point. Number 10 is the 7 Battle Royale with 3,010,854 views. I mean, it's The Boys and it's a paid sponsorship battle. Anyone who is a fan of The Boys was already going to watch this since The Boys' Twitter account was posting about this anyways. Number 9, Venom vs. Chrono with 3,336,781 views. I'm so glad Soul Eater got on Death Battle. This is a fun matchup with a character that people already wanted to see back on Death Battle since his last appearance was kinda meh. Number 8 is Sanji vs. Rock Lee with 3,856,723 views. I'm actually a little confused that it's this high up. I guess Sanji and Rock Lee are popular characters in their own right, I just never see them paired up against each other. It just seems like kind of a mismatch if you ask me. Number 7 is Miles Morales vs. Static Shock with 3,881,603 views. God, I love this idea. This should be number 1. Number 6 is Goro vs. Machamp with 4,603,711 views. People really wanted to see Mortal Kombat and Pokemon fight each other. Number 5 is Genos vs. War Machine with 4,626,342 views. It's a really stupid stupid matchup, but the characters are both very popular, so it makes sense it hit the top 5. Number 4 is Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier with 4,733,433 views. A really fun idea with both a Marvel and a DC character. Plus, you got Ismahawk to push those views for you a little bit. Number 3 is Flash vs. Archie Sonic with 6,069,989 views. Who hasn't talked about Flash vs. Sonic before? I'm surprised this isn't number 1. Number 2 is Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi with 6,540,203 views. I know Star Wars and Naruto are already pretty popular, but I'm surprised this got this many views. I know these series have similarities, but I just never saw them get paired together that much in the Discord or even online forums. And number 1 is Hulk vs. Broly with 10,149,337 views. Big green guys that punch each other and they get stronger when they get angrier. A lot of people wanted this, it deserves the number 1 spot. Overall, Season 7 had 80,691,606 views. But now moving on to a fan favorite season, Season 8. First we have number 16 with Macho Man vs. Kool-Aid Man with 1,376,211 views. This is a funny matchup, but it wasn't that widely requested. Plus, when you see it's an episode about Boomstick's dad, it's not really going to get shared around the way you want it to be. Number 15 is Blake vs. Mikasa with 2,056,655 views. This episode is criticized a lot, but you know, I kinda like it. But again, I think it just comes really close to last place because people really don't like Rooster Teeth that much. I know Death Battle at the time was a Rooster Teeth show, but since it existed before Rooster Teeth, I think people were willing to look past it. Number 14 is Korra vs. Storm with 2,380,066 views. When they revealed Korra was going to be on the show, I never thought it would be against Storm because that was like her most boring matchup. I understand why they didn't go with Rey or Delsin, but I think either one still would have been a better idea than just using Storm. Number 13 is Hiachi vs. Geese with 2,518,296 views. Can't someone give my fighting game some love, please? Number 12 is Steven vs. Star with 2,578,608 views. This is a really creative and fun idea. I think if they just released this episode earlier, it would have gotten more views. So please don't do the same thing with Luz vs. On. Number 11 is Link vs. Cloud 2 with 2,846,022 views. Breath of the Wild was fucking amazing. They carried that momentum into this episode really well, I think. Number 10 is Akuma vs. Shao Kahn with 3,057,459 views. Can I please just get a fighting game to top the top 5 most viewed, please? But this is Mortal Kombat vs. Street Fighter, so fuck this episode. Number 9 is Yoda vs. King Mickey with 3,174,421 views. With a series like Kingdom Hearts that practically just prints views on YouTube, I'm surprised this didn't get higher. Number 8 is Shadow vs. Ryuko with 3,603,667 views. It's got a Sonic character. Number 7 is Lex Luthor vs. Dr. Doom with 3,881,665 views. I think after Season 7, people were a little burnt out on Marvel vs. DC episodes, and I think we're going to start seeing a trend here. Number 6 is Iron Fist vs. Poe with 4,014,185 views. Kung Fu Panda carried the shit out of this, because no way Iron Fist did shit for views. Number 5 is Madara vs. Aizen with 5,368,405 views. This was a highly requested matchup, one I saw all the time, so I'm surprised it's not number 1 this season. Number 4 is Batman vs. Iron Man with 5,918,900 views. The last Marvel vs. DC matchup on the list, and it couldn't even top the top 3. Number 3, Dio vs. Alucard with 6,208,361 views. You thought Madara vs. Aizen would make it in the top 3, but it was Dio. Number 2 is Goku Black vs. Reverse Flash with 7,050,232 views. It was at this moment they realized Dragon Ball gets views. And number 1, Saitama vs. Popeye with 8,884,088 views. That's a lot of 8. Saitama carried the shit out of this, but I can imagine some people were just so curious to see if Popeye can fight him, and then probably disappointed at the conclusion. Overall, Season 8 got 64,917,241 views. Now we have Season 9, starting with number 17, Raiden vs. Excalibur with 2,950,050 views. I just don't think people were that interested in seeing Warframe on Death Battle. Number 16, Harley Quinn vs. Jinx with 2,962,455 views. Honestly, surprised this didn't get higher, but I've seen all those League of Legends memes. I know people don't like League of Legends that much. Number 15, Jason Voorhees vs. Michael Myers with 3,083,851 views. This was a very popular matchup. I'm surprised it got this low, but the quality of the episode wasn't great, so I'm fine with it. Number 14, Trunks vs. Silver with 3,134,397 views. With a Dragon Ball vs. Sonic matchup, I expected this to get a lot higher. This season is really weird with views. Number 13, Boba Fett vs. Predator with 3,225,488 views. I've heard this matchup talked about a lot. It's a little weird that they don't have a specific Predator, they just kind of composited every Predator, but it's okay. Number 12, Zatanna vs. Scarlet Witch with 3,226,438 views. And yes, I said it like that because saying versus Zatanna is very hard for me for some reason. Again, I'm surprised this didn't get as many views, but it makes sense when you think about how people were probably burnt out by Marvel vs. DC at the time. Number 11, Deku vs. Asta with 3,281,671 views. This matchup is really fun, but it's just not the preferred for either character for almost anyone, I think. Number 10, Magneto vs. Tetsuo with 3,357,464 views. I honestly thought that Akira would carry the views for this episode, but it turns out I was wrong. Number 9, Black Adam vs. Apocalypse with 3,372,209. This is the last Marvel vs. DC matchup this season, and it barely even cracked the top 10. I'm hoping because of this we get a shift and we don't see as many Marvel vs. DC matchups in the future. Maybe like one a year would be fine. Number 8, Sauron vs. Lich King with 3,376,196 views. It's so special to finally get Lord of the Rings and World of Warcraft on the show. The fact that it actually made it past the halfway point in terms of views for this season makes me actually really happy. Number 7, Hercules vs. Sun Wukong with 3,880,777 views. It should have been called Heracles vs. Sun Wukong, but whatever. Number 6, John Wick vs. James Bond with 3,972,051 views. It's the smallest scale matchup we got this season, and it's one of the funnest, I think. Number 5, SpongeBob vs. Aquaman with 3,987,660 views. Number 4, Tanjiro vs. Jonathan Joestar with 4,098,331 views. I don't understand how this got so high. I'm guessing Demon Slayer carried it, but I'm not sure. Number 3 is Gogeta vs. Vegeta with 4,498,071 views. The casual audience always debates this matchup. I've seen this so many times. But the Death Battle audience already knew the answer of this episode the second it got announced. But casually, I'm surprised this isn't number 1. Number 2, Thor vs. Vegeta with 5,694,288 views. I lied. I see why I didn't beat this. I've seen this matchup a lot, and it's a very fun idea. And number 1 is Omni-Man vs. Homelander with 13,371,691 views. That's a very crazy difference, and more than doubles the last episode's views. But this got shared around with both the boys' Twitter account and Invincible's Twitter account, so both audiences were seeing this episode. Overall, Season 9 got 71,473,088 views. Now we have the actual best season of Death Battle. Season 10, starting with number 16, Killua vs. Misaka with 1,608,976 views. Hunter x Hunter used to be really popular, and a certain scientific railgun or a certain magical index just could not carry the views for this. Number 15 is Guts vs. Dimitri with 2,179,629 views. I'm fucking shocked and disgusted that this episode is this low on the list. More people need to see this right now. It's such a fucking fantastic episode. Number 14, Cole vs. Alex with 2,215,516 views. Really goes to show that they were kinda right that people wouldn't carry that much of an interest in this episode. But I was one of the people who actually voted for this episode because I really wanted to see it as a death battle. So I'm so glad they ended up doing it. Number 13 is Stitch vs. Rocket with 2,360,999 views. It's a really good matchup idea. Just hands down, it's so fun. And I'm pretty sure the Raptor cried when it got announced, so good for you, man. Number 12 is Raven vs. Phoenix with 2,412,849 views. Both characters I think are really fucking popular, so I'm surprised it didn't get higher. At least higher than the other Marvel vs. DC matchups this year, because whew, what the fuck? Speaking of, number 11 is Silver Surfer vs. Martian Manhunter with 2,442,427 views. And number 10 is Ant-Man vs. Atom with 2,549,066 views. All of these episodes were just alright, but you can really tell that the burnout is real. Number 9 is Skyrim vs. Dark Souls with 2,997,023 views. With a name like that, I don't know how the fuck it didn't get more views, but it's an excellent episode overall. Number 8 is Scooby vs. Courage with 3,139,273 views. Again, matchup just makes sense. Get this more views. The animation's amazing. Number 7 is Darth Vader vs. Obito with 3,345,902 views. There's a lot of connections to these two characters, and I guess people really want to see Naruto vs. Star Wars. Number 6 is Galactus vs. Unicron with 3,632,586 views. So much for being the most wanted death battle. It didn't even get the most views. Number 5 is Rick vs. the Doctor with 3,842,347 views. Even though Rick and Morty went through a big controversy, I think they recovered pretty well. And Doctor Who is extremely popular, so I think this matchup makes a lot of sense of why it got so many views. Number 4 is Frieza vs. Megatron with 4,100,022 views. This was a highly requested matchup for years, even if a certain person didn't want it that much. Number 3, Bill Cipher vs. Discord with 4,378,239 views. Bill Cipher is an incredibly popular character. There's no way in hell that this didn't make it in the top 3 this season, especially with a My Little Pony character, which, as we've seen, just makes views. Number 2 is Goku vs. Superman 3 with 5,567,913 views. I'm shocked that it came in second place, because this is such a popular idea, and people get so mad whenever Death Battle does it. But there's just one episode that knocked it out of that number 1 spot, and that is number 1, Gojo vs. Makima, with 6,208,926 views. This is just such a fucking amazing idea. This was my 4th wanted matchup when it came out. God, I'm grateful every day they actually did it. Overall, Death Battle Season 10 has 52,981,693 views. Over time, I think this might be the most viewed season with how good it actually is. This leads us into Death Battle 2024, starting with Among Us vs. Fall Guys with 1,358,930 views. Just like Steven vs. Star, this is an episode that just came out too late. Number 3 is Joker vs. Giorno with 1,637,617 views. People wanted this matchup at some point, but the debate got really toxic, so nobody really wanted to talk about it anymore. Number 2 is Bardock vs. Omni-Man with 2,198,353 views. Dragon Ball and Invincible are really popular alone. Put them together, boom, views. And number 1 by a long shot is Bowser vs. Dr. Eggman with 3,995,484 views. An idea that people have talked about since the Genesis and SNES era. It took them so long to make this matchup, but I'm so glad it did. It came out almost absolutely perfectly. Overall, Death Battle 2024 has 9,190,384 views. Of all the episodes we have right now, these are the most viewed episodes of the show. It makes sense that all of the most popular episodes are from Season 1 and 2, seeing as they've just been around for so long. I just think it's interesting that no other episode seems to come close to the popularity of these episodes. Maybe next year if I do this video again, we'll see a change, but as for right now, these are the most popular episodes of Death Battle in the show's history. Number 10, Pokemon Battle Royale. Number 9, Terminator vs. RoboCop. Number 8, Iron Man vs. Lex Luthor. Number 7, Batman vs. Captain America. Number 6, Goku vs. Superman 2. Number 5, Godzilla vs. Gamera. Number 4, Mario vs. Sonic. Number 3, Batman vs. Spider-Man. Number 2, Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. And number 1, Goku vs. Superman. On top of that, here's an average view count per episode in each season. I think this is a better way to gauge the popularity of each season because each season has a different number of episodes, so taking the average makes more sense, at least to me that is. Number 11 is Death Battle 2024, with an average of 2,297,596 views. Number 10 is Death Battle Season 10, with an average of 3,311,356 views. Number 9 is Death Battle Season 7, with an average of 3,842,457 views. Number 8 is Death Battle Season 8, with an average of 4,057,328 views. Number 7 is Death Battle Season 9, with an average of 4,204,299 views. Number 6 is Death Battle Season 6, with an average of 5,890,181 views. Number 5 is Season 4, with 6,112,650 views. Number 4 is Season 5, with 6,515,827 views. Number 3 is Death Battle Season 3, with 8,462,321 views. Number 2, losing only by a little bit, is Death Battle Season 1 with 12,215,061 views. And number 1 is Death Battle Season 2 with an average of 12,488,848 views. Like I said in the beginning, I want to rank the most popular episodes in each season since I think people wanted that when I made my community post in the first place. I'm just going to be quick about these since I want to review these episodes individually in depth in separate reviews. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Number 11, Naruto vs. Ichigo. This episode without a doubt has issues, like a lot of them. I originally had this 2 spots higher in the list before rewatching the episode. I have 3 main problems. Number 1, the line, "Sorry Bleach fans, I know you really wanted a win here," in the conclusion seems so spiteful. You can say this line for every other episode of Death Battle. No matter who wins the battle, someone's favorite or preferred character loses. So why say this here? When I first saw it, it made me think that they didn't like Bleach and just wanted their audience to know that. Now, I don't think that anymore. I just really thought that that's how they wanted that statement to come off here. Second is that they try to speculate how strong and fast Ichigo is based on a power multiplier that makes absolutely no sense. They give every form a times 10 multiplier because they say Ichigo's Bankai gives him a times 10 multiplier, or at least it potentially could. Not only do some of the forms here not make sense, Dangai Ichigo got completely reverted because the Dangai reverted Ichigo's body to how he was before he entered the Dangai. But that Dangai form is way more than a times 10 multiplier to his power even if you did use it. Just looking at the difference between Ichigo when he fought Aizen before and after he got the transformation makes that obvious. I could go on, and in my review I'll talk about everything, but this conclusion really soiled the episode for me, and the animation wasn't too much better. Number 10, Ghost Rider vs. Lobo. I am not a fan of this episode as much as some other people. For these next few matchups, the analyses and the conclusions make sense, and are pretty good in their own right, so I'm just basing my ranking for these on the fights themselves. I don't know why they decided on this matchup at all. Ghost Rider is literally a win condition against Lobo. I get that Lobo is broken as fuck with his regeneration, but I feel like they both had better matchups, like a certain elephant in the room. That being said, the fight is fairly fun. I feel like neither character really got to show off their insane arsenals very well, but they did have a fun back and forth where they were both destroying each other's bodies and constantly regenerating. It's not a bad episode at all, just not my favorite one on this list. Number 9, Thanos vs. Darkseid. This was a big deal when it came out, probably because the Marvel movies were making Thanos more popular than ever. I seem to like this episode more than other people, but there's one glaring issue that really bothers me. For some reason, Death Battle will never tell you what the Infinity Stones actually do. It's cool to let Thanos have them, but saying the names of the different stones doesn't tell you what those different stones actually do. Other than that, everything else is fine. I do like this fight, but I also admit they didn't use some of their more unique abilities. But moments like Thanos flipping the world, having Darkseid crawl out of the black hole, and seeing Darkseid's true form were just so cool for me. In short, the fight could definitely be better, maybe make it less of a slugfest, but I still like it. Number 8, Hulk vs. Broly. This episode is very divisive, but I still like it. A lot of people disagree with the conclusion, but I think it's right. Broly is so powerful that just clashing his punches with someone of equal power was breaking all of reality. Aside from the debate, I do like the fight. Having Broly start off as way weaker than Hulk was a smart choice. Broly can transform and increase his strength exponentially. Hulk also gets stronger the more angry he gets, but with Broly's transformations, Broly would eventually start powering up faster than the Hulk. The Hulk does have his World Breaker form, but I don't think it would make up the difference in power at the end of the day. It's a bit strange to see the Hulk use light punches instead of strong attacks, and the attacks are also lacking in impact, at least with the sound effects they use when the punches land, but those issues don't affect me that much. This is a fun episode that capped off one of my least favorite seasons on a positive note. Number 7, Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. This episode has something that only one other episode in this list has: peak Torian animation. This fight is ever shifting and moves around a lot. You go from them using guns in the park, to Deadpool pulling out his swords and Deathstroke pulling out his staff in a grassy field, to Deathstroke using his sword when he's fighting Deadpool break dancing on top of a moving bus. This fight is so fun, it's so silly, and a perfect representation of what the best death battles in Season 2 looked like. Number 6, Goku vs. Superman. This is the first death battle episode where I think they took their research seriously, and I think it really shows. They go through a lot of details compared to the other episodes in Season 1, and I think it was really worth it. You can tell they are passionate and care about this matchup, and maybe they wanted to try and avoid the outrage if they didn't make their points clear. The fight though is spectacular. It may be, oh my god, 10 minutes long, but there is so much personality, dialogue, exchange of abilities, and memorable moments. Goku destroying the kryptonite so he can fight Superman at his best, them both using the sun to gather their energy, that two-timing asshole, and Superman just getting so annoyed with the power pole that he just yeets it away. This episode is so fun and deserves the legacy it's achieved in Death Battle's history. Number 5, Omni-Man vs. Homelander. This episode is proof that people just really want to see a whiny bitch get what's coming to him. That's all this episode was, and it does that so well while also being respectful to both characters. Omni-Man stomps Homelander. You didn't need any of the analysis or the conclusion to know that. The star of the show is the fight by far for 3 reasons. 1, the animation looks really good, the art style resembles the Invincible show, and even though it isn't too action-packed, Homelander still lands noticeable damage to Nolan in a way that makes sense. And that setup, man. This is the best setup any death battle has ever had. If I had the choice of either having this setup, which is a little long, or having a slightly longer fight, I'd take what they gave us any day of the week. Number 4, Saitama vs. Popeye. This episode is hilarious and fun all around. Saitama at the time was very straightforward on what he could do and how he fights, so all they really needed to do was find a way to put a cap on his power. And I feel like them using the least amount of effort a human can exert as his normal punch makes a lot of sense. With Popeye, they needed to cover all of his crazy and kooky abilities and feats, and again, they did really well. I don't know why this matchup exists, but they made it fun. I mean, and just look at this fight. It's 2D, 3D, and sprite animated. They really put their all into this. The voices are perfect, the animation and the sets are amazing, and the star of the show is Saitama's realization that his muscles ache and that he's finally found a real fight. It's emotional, it's beautifully voiced, it's an absolutely perfect moment. Season 8 of Death Battle was a high point after Season 7, and it capped off with an episode that a lot of people saw as the best episode of all time. Number 3, Dante vs. Bayonetta. It's a little weird to put this episode directly after one I like as much as Saitama vs. Popeye, but I do have a good reason. It's bias. I like the episodes about equally, but I specifically like these characters and this matchup more than I did Saitama vs. Popeye. Dante and Bayonetta do not have a complicated story, so the real meat of this episode was their arsenals, stats, and which one would realistically get to put the other one down first. The fight is fantastic. Both Dante and Bayonetta show their arsenals in such a fun way and bounce off of each other perfectly. Some people would hate that Trish and Jean show up in the fight just to promote DBX, but it's just so silly and stupid that I love it. Plus, just look at this animation for all 4 of them. Torian, your talent knows no bounds. This was a wonderful way to start Death Battle Season 3, even if this episode might have been hell behind the scenes. Number 2, Gojo vs. Makima. This episode was my 4th most wanted episode of all time when it was released. This battle is fascinating in many ways. Both analyses were very good. People may have an issue with how they interpreted Makima's bang ability since after this episode released, we learned that Death Battle was wrong about their interpretation of this ability. Honestly though, I don't put it past them for getting it wrong since their interpretation was the same as mine. It's the only way that Makima can actually hit Gojo too, so it's a plus from me, dog. This episode also has some special rules, like how they are both citizens of the same Japan and how devils and curses are being seen as comparable beings. I like this, but I find it very weird since pretty much every death battle has special rules like this. For example, the Sharingan can break the user out of any genjutsu. Aizen can put someone in complete hypnosis, so they said the Sharingan can break Aizen's Shikai. Stuff like that happens all the time in death battle, but I will admit that in Gojo vs. Makima, maybe these abilities were too specific so they had to state it outright. Either way, I really like it and I hope we get these special rules more. I love every part of this episode. The analysis, fight, conclusion, and editing are amazing and it came out exactly the way I wanted it to. And finally, we have number 1, Bowser vs. Eggman. I've already talked about this episode so much it's sad, so I'll keep this brief. It's one of the best episodes of the show. Almost every part of the episode is perfect and is absolutely dripping with passion. Anyone who is a part of this episode should feel proud. And that's really it for this video. I hope some people found it interesting. I certainly do. That's why I started making this video in the first place. Like I said, at the same time in 2025, I'm going to be doing the same type of video, comparing views and seeing which episode got major traction this year. I hope to do this yearly, if it remains interesting and people want to see it, that is. But that's all the time I have for today. Is there any surprises you saw on this list? Does any episode seem like it needs more views? Let me know in the comments. Take care, everyone, and let's all get hyped for Kratos vs. Asura.